They were just kids. 10 of them, gone without a trace. No screams, no footprints, no bodies. One minute they were hiking along a well-worn trail in the Smoky Mountains, and the next nothing. 34 years later, their names still echo through ranger logs and missing persons boards like a question no one can answer. No one saw them leave. No one heard them go. Only the wind through the pines and the silence that followed. It happened in July 1991, just days after the 4th of July. A youth program from Bartow County, Georgia, had planned a week-long wilderness retreat for a group of at-risk teens, something to give them purpose, confidence, maybe even redemption. Most of them had never seen a mountain before, but on the morning of July 12th, they shouldered their packs, laced up their boots, and followed their counselors into the woods near Clingman's Dome. They were expected back 3 days later. When they didn't return by sunset on the 14th, a staff member drove out to the trailhead. Their van was still there, dust-coated and untouched. The forest was silent. No radio calls, no distress flares, no footprints heading back. It was as if the trail had swallowed them whole. What followed was one of the largest search and rescue operations in Tennessee state history. Helicopters flew grid patterns overhead. Bloodhounds picked up a scent, then lost it within 50 yards. Rangers, volunteers, even National Guard personnel swept the trails, the cliffs, the streams. Nothing. Not a scrap of clothing. Not a breadcrumb. Just trees. Endless trees. The press dubbed it the Trailhead 10. Locals had other names, whispered ones. Theories ranged from an animal attack to mass runaway to something older, stranger things that don't belong in official reports. For decades, parents kept rooms untouched, letters unopened, birthdays remembered. The trail signs have been replaced. Maps updated, but the woods remember. In 2025, a drone survey team stumbled across something strange in a clearing miles off any marked trail. A circle of stones, charred earth, and in the center, bleached bones arranged too precisely to be an accident. The case was reopened. DNA tests confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The 10 were never lost. They were waiting to be found. It was the kind of summer that made the air feel heavy. Cicadas shrieked from trees like static over a bad radio signal, and heat clung to skin like wet cloth. In a small clearing outside Cartersville, Georgia, the Camp Juniper Ridge program was winding down its 3rd season. It was built for kids who had slipped between the cracks, too old for day camps, too young for real consequences. The goal wasn't just fun. It was discipline through nature, transformation through sweat and distance. That year's final group was a patchwork of kids from different counties, different backstories, 10 of them in total, ranging from 11 to 15. Some had stolen bikes. Some had skipped too much school. A few just needed somewhere to be that wasn't home. Their names are still etched into files somewhere: Logan, Evie, Darnell, Sadie, Marcus, and the rest. All with stories, all unfinished. Their counselors were experienced enough. 2 men in their 20s, ex-military and former Eagle Scouts, both cleared through background checks. The planned route was a simple 2-night hike through a heavily wooded ridge system northwest of Clingman's Dome. Nothing extreme. Clear trails, topo maps, scheduled check-ins. They left on July 12th with enough gear for a 3-day round trip. Each kid carried a pack, a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and a trail whistle. There was nothing unusual that morning. Staff saw them off at the base of the ridge's miles, waves, a few jokes. Jared, the lanky kid with the tape recorder, said he was going to make a documentary. Sadie rolled her eyes. Evie laughed. It was normal. Just kids being kids. The group disappeared into the tree line at 9:18 a.m. By July 14th, the check-in hadn't come. Radio silence. A camp supervisor drove to the trailhead. The van was still parked, windows dusty, tires settled. He waited an hour, then 3. By dusk, he called the sheriff. Search efforts launched that night, but even under floodlights and thermal drones, the woods were quiet. Too quiet. Not a single trace of movement, not even the telltale signs of a campfire. They hadn't just disappeared. They had been erased. 34 years would pass before the trail reopened itself when the forest, in its own time, gave something back. They weren't friends, not at first, just names on a clipboard, shuffled into a group photo and packed off to Camp Juniper Ridge. 10 kids, each with their own weight to carry, each hiding something behind sunburnt faces and forced laughter. But by the end of their first week together, the lines had blurred. Inside jokes bloomed. Rivalries softened. Something like trust began to form thin, fragile but real. There was Logan Reyes, 15, wiry and sharp-eyed. He was the closest thing they had to a leader, the one who volunteered to go first across logs and kept count during head checks. He wasn't loud, but when he talked, people listened. Then there was Evie Carter, 13, quiet, almost invisible at first. She drew in the margins of her trail map birds, constellations, trees with eyes. When someone finally noticed her sketchbook, she shrugged and said, "I just see stuff sometimes." No one laughed. Not really. Darnell Briggs was the class clown, always with a new impersonation or joke. He claimed his cousin had seen Bigfoot in the Smokies and was ready to punch it in the face. Sadie Glenn, tall for 14, didn't talk much but had the kind of glare that ended arguments. She watched over the younger ones like a reluctant big sister. Marcus Boone never stopped asking questions about moss, about clouds, about death. Then there were the younger ones, Tyrell, Maya, Gracie, Tommy, and Owen, the kind of kids that bounced between foster homes or were labeled difficult in school files. But out in the woods, those labels didn't matter. They were just tired, curious, hopeful. For some, this was the first time they'd ever seen stars without streetlights in the way. The chaperones, Josh Eaton and Kyle Drenner, kept things moving. Josh was all charm and khakis, always with a clipboard and a whistle. Kyle was quieter, his military buzz cut already growing out. He handled injuries, gear checks, and the occasional midnight meltdown. Between them, they ran a tight ship. The group dynamic had started to settle by July 12th. Logan called trail directions. Evie was the map keeper. Darnell made everyone laugh at lunch. And somewhere between miles, these kids, most of them strangers just a week before, had begun to feel like something close to a family. They started just after breakfast. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden streaks, the air thick but calm. The group stretched out across the trail like a colorful procession of movement and noise, backpacks bouncing, canteens sloshing, boots crunching gravel. Spirits were high. No one was in a rush. Josh led from the front, Kyle taking up the rear, keeping an eye on stragglers. The hike was supposed to be simple. 10 miles, moderate elevation, marked every half mile with park signage. But about 3 hours in, Logan spotted something curious. A narrow offshoot trail branching right from the main path. No marker. Just a gap in the underbrush, worn faintly from years of footfall or animal passage. It wasn't on the standard route, but Josh had seen it on one of the older topo maps. He paused, considered, then made the call. "Shortcut," he said. "Leads to a ridge with great views. We'll camp near there tonight." The group veered off trail around noon. The path narrowed and climbed. Trees grew thicker, older. Some looked half dead, draped in moss like forgotten statues. The forest changed subtle liquider, denser, as if it were watching. But no one said that. The kids were too busy laughing, pointing out weird mushrooms, joking about ghosts. Only Evie seemed uneasy, glancing back now and then like she was counting trees. By mid-afternoon they reached the ridge. It wasn't marked on any official park map. No signs, no cleared site. Just a natural shelf overlooking a valley thick with pine and fog. They pitched tents in a loose circle, dropped their packs, and relaxed. Someone lit a small fire. Darnell roasted marshmallows he'd smuggled in. Kyle logged their coordinates on a clipboard, but the GPS glitched, blinking out briefly before recalibrating. He frowned but said nothing. As dusk settled, the kids crawled into sleeping bags. The fire burned low. Evie sketched something in the dim light circles, inside circles. She didn't know why. In the distance, a whip-poor-will called once, then fell silent. No one could know that this ridge, this quiet, unmarked slice of forest hadn't seen human footsteps in over 50 years. And no one knew that it would soon see no footsteps at all. Not ever again. It was just after 7:30 p.m. when Ranger Dennis Coates caught sight of the group. He was patrolling a maintenance trail southeast of the ridge, checking for signs of illegal campfires and downed trees. The sun was slipping behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the understory. Then, through a gap in the trees, he saw movement, colorful jackets, the orange flicker of a campfire, the unmistakable rhythm of laughter. He counted 10 kids, 2 adults. All appeared fine-tired, maybe, but smiling. One of the girls waved when she spotted him. He waved back and kept moving, noting the fire was small and safely ringed. They were camping close to a natural clearing, not a designated site, but not illegal either. He marked the location in his notebook, wrote the date, July 12, 1991. Nothing seemed off. If anything, it was refreshing. A group of teens unplugged, bonding in the wilderness without screens or sirens. Ranger Coates finished his loop and returned to the station around 9:00 p.m. He mentioned the group in passing to a colleague. Some youth camp from Georgia, settled on that old overlook. Seemed like good kids. That was the last time anyone ever saw them. The next morning, the clearing was empty. No tents, no fire pit, no backpacks, no footprints, just forest. Thick, undisturbed, and wrong. When the next ranger arrived to double-check on the camp part of routine backtrail safety check, she found nothing. The brush around the ridge looked untouched, like no one had ever been there. No crushed grass, no gear, no trash. Even the ashes from the fire were gone. At first, they assumed the group had packed out early, but the trail that led in showed no exit prints, no movement, no sign of human passage beyond what Coates had seen the night before, as if the ground itself had reset. They called Camp Juniper Ridge to confirm the group had returned. They hadn't. By noon, the call went out to the county sheriff. By dusk, the forest was swarming, and the ridge that had welcomed 10 kids and 2 counselors the night before stood still and silent, as if it had already forgotten them. At first, no one panicked. Groups run late, radios die, trails get confusing, but by that evening, as the sun dipped below the Smokies again and there was still no word, the mood shifted. Parents called in. Counselors back at base camp tried not to sound alarmed, but there was something brittle in their voices, something frayed. At 6:12 p.m., on July 14, 1991, Bartow County Dispatch received the official missing persons report. Within hours, a command post was set up at the trailhead. Floodlights erected. Maps spread across folding tables. The word "lost" hung in the air like smoke. The first responders combed the marked trail, expecting to find the group camped slightly off course. They found nothing. No voices, no prints. Just the steady hum of insects and the vast indifference of the forest. By day 2, helicopters circled overhead. FLIR cameras scanned the ridgelines. Search dogs were brought in. They picked up a scent briefly, then lost it at the foot of a dry creek bed. Volunteers joined the effort. Locals, hikers, even off-duty officers. Hundreds of boots on the ground. They swept the area in grids, yelling names into the dark. Josh Eaton and Kyle Drenner, the 2 chaperones, were among the missing. Neither had criminal records. Both had been thoroughly vetted. The background checks were solid, their personnel files clean. But now they were part of a case that was unraveling by the hour. The weather held for a while. Then the rain came. A hard, drumming downpour that erased what little trail might have remained. Mudslides broke sections of old logging roads. Radios cut in and out. Visibility dropped. Every theory was explored. Animal attack? Unlikely no blood? No signs of struggle. Runaway? 10 kids vanishing together without a trace? Impossible. Foul play? No evidence. Nothing made sense. By the end of the first week, officials had searched nearly 30 square miles of dense, mountainous terrain. They found a single item, a torn corner of map paper stuck to the bark of a birch tree. No name. No markings. Just a scrap, brittle with rain. The search didn't stop. It just got quieter. Fewer people. Less press. By August, it had become a recovery mission. By September, it was a memory. But the parents never stopped looking, and the woods never gave anything back. On day 9 of the search, a break at least, that's what they thought. 2 hikers from a volunteer group stumbled across a shallow limestone cave tucked into the eastern slope of Bald Knob Ridge, roughly 4 miles from the group's last known location. It wasn't marked on the map, and from the trail, it looked like just another rock overhang. But inside, the air was cooler, still, unsettling. What they found stopped them cold. 10 backpacks, stacked neatly, side by side, almost ceremonial in their placement, covered in a fine layer of dust but otherwise untouched. The zippers were closed, tags still visible. One had a friendship bracelet looped around the strap. Another had Evie's sketchbook tucked inside. Her last drawing? A ring of trees, bent inward, like they were leaning to listen. There were no footprints inside the cave, not around it. The ground outside was hard-packed clay, but even saw nothing. No animal tracks, no drag marks, no blood. It was as if the backpacks had been lowered from the sky and arranged with surgical precision. Rangers swept the cave with UV lights. No signs of struggle, no evidence of water or wildlife. One of the radios had batteries, but when powered on, it gave only a burst of static, then silence. Another held a tape recorder. Inside, Jared's final audio log, recorded the night before they disappeared. Only static, then faint laughter, then nothing. The discovery was supposed to bring answers. Instead, it raised more questions. Why leave their gear? Why stack it? And where were the kids? Josh and Kyle's packs weren't among them. The cave was photographed, cataloged, and sealed. But for the parents especially, those who had clung to hope it was a funeral without bodies, proof that their children had been there, and proof that something had taken them away. The cave became a focal point for the search, but no further evidence emerged. No clothing, no bones, no food wrappers. The ridge fell silent again, and the forest closed in, like it always does. The media caught fire, first local, then national. Headlines screamed across morning papers. 10 children vanish in Smoky Mountains. Talk shows debated the timeline. Radio hosts fielded wild calls. Someone swore they saw strange lights above the forest. Another claimed they'd found symbols burned into trees. None of it could be verified. All of it was terrifying. Theories exploded. Some said the group had run away, planned their escape like a coordinated mass exodus. But from what? They had no money, no plan, no motive. Others claimed it was a rogue bear attack, but no blood was found, no torn clothing. And since when do bears fold up backpacks and leave radios behind? One theory blamed the chaperones Josh and Kyle. Maybe they'd snapped, lured the kids off trail, and done something terrible. But then why disappear too? Why no signs of a struggle? Why no evidence of anything? Then came the whispers. A cult, that's what they said. A backwoods, off-grid group hiding deep in the Smokies. Kidnappers, brainwashers, sacrificers. People remembered old stories about the land, the old ridges, the covens that used to gather before the park was ever mapped. The cave only fed the fire. Some said the bags were an offering, a ritual, a marker. Paranoia spread fast. Parents were harassed, accused, defended. A few were hounded by reporters on their front lawns. One mother tried to break into the sealed cave, screaming that her daughter was still alive and calling her name into the earth. Then the FBI stepped in. Files were classified. Helicopters grounded. The command center was scaled back. Whatever was happening was now happening behind closed doors. Still, the families gathered each year on July 12th at the trailhead. Some prayed, some screamed, some just stood in silence. They brought flowers, toys, photos laminated to withstand the rain. They didn't believe in accidents anymore. Because kids don't just disappear. Not like that, not all 10, not without leaving the world behind. And yet that's exactly what they'd done. It was Ranger Eli Bramwell, long retired by then, who first said it out loud. The trail they took it wasn't real. Not officially. Not anymore. Back in the 1970s, Bramwell had helped cut trails through the upper ridgelines during a federal wilderness expansion. He knew the Smokies better than anyone. Every creek, every bluff, every turn that went nowhere. When news of the missing kids hit the airwaves, he looked at the map they showed on TV and something twisted in his gut. They shouldn't have been there, he said. The trail, the one Josh and Kyle allegedly led them down, wasn't on any current park map. Not printed, not digital, not even archived. But Bramwell remembered it, barely. A thin game trail that had once been used by early trappers, maybe even the Wachi, the tribe that disappeared before the settlers ever arrived. The path ran straight through a patch of forest locals once called Dead Root Hollow. It was removed from official circulation sometime in the 60s after a series of unexplained injuries, one death, and a fire that burned for 3 days but never left a scorch mark on the trees. Eli still had an old laminated survey map from 1954. He pulled it from his garage, dusted it off, and found what he was looking for, a dashed line curling off the main trail, marked only with a faded red stamp. Restricted, FSR 40, 1B. No one remembered what FSR 41B even stood for. He tried contacting the park office, got passed around, then politely thanked and forgotten, but he kept the map. Folklore came next. Campfire stories passed between rangers after closing hours, tales of travelers losing time, of strange chanting heard in the valleys with no echo. A Boy Scout troop that went missing in 1000, 939 3 found, one never recovered. And always, the same ridge, the same shadow of a path, the place the trees grow too close together, the place the compasses lie. Most of it was shrugged off. Ghost stories, mountain myths. But when 10 kids disappeared in 1,991 and not a single soul could explain how, Bramwell stopped laughing. Some trails were never meant to be walked again. By late autumn, the case went cold. The command post at the trailhead was disassembled. Maps were boxed. Tents packed. Search logs filed and sealed. There were no more clues. No new evidence. Just forest and silence and 10 empty beds no one knew how to explain. The FBI classified the investigation as inactive, pending discovery. A polite way of saying they gave up. Families were notified by letter. Short, formal, cold. As if the language could numb the loss. It didn't. Some parents spiraled into grief, into addiction, into private investigators who promised everything but found nothing. Others held tight to hope like a lifeline. They left porch lights on, set empty plates at dinner, kept voicemail inboxes active just in case. At Forest Glen Middle School, 10 yearbooks were left with blank pages. Teachers lit candles. One retired early, saying the halls felt too empty. Another transferred, unable to teach kids whose friends had just vanished. By the time spring came, most people had moved on. Other headlines filled the space. Another missing child in Idaho, a wildfire in California. The world kept spinning. But the ridge stayed still. Nature reasserted itself. The clearing where they had camped grew over. Ivy crawled up the trees. Moss covered the rocks. The cave swallowed its own shadows. Even the path FSR 41BF faded, like the forest had reached up to reclaim it. For 34 years, there was nothing. No discoveries, no confessions, no sightings. Just silence. Deep, unyielding. Until the drone. June 2025. A college research team mapping tree growth patterns spotted something odd. A perfect circle in a sea of chaos. The underbrush pressed outward. The trees surrounding it burned from the base, but still standing. And in the center white shapes, just visible beneath the canopy. Bones. Arranged with purpose. What the forest had taken, it was finally ready to return. But it wouldn't give it back whole. It was supposed to be routine. A field team from the University of North Georgia, part of a graduate anthropology program, had been contracted to conduct vegetation surveys in an unmarked quadrant of the western Smoky Mountain backcountryland, technically within park bounds, but untouched for decades. No trails, no campgrounds. Just raw, unmanaged forest, the kind maps don't bother to name anymore. They were 3 days into the survey, hiking slowly, documenting flora and erosion, when their drone launched to chart canopy density picked up something strange. A break in the pattern. Trees pulled away from a central point. Like something had pressed outward in all directions. Something circular. Unnatural. At first, they assumed wind damage, or maybe a fire scar. But when the drone dropped lower, its camera caught something else. White. Bone white. Scattered, but symmetrical. The feed was glitchy, buffered by dense interference, but there was no mistaking the layout. A clearing about 35 feet in diameter, nearly perfect in shape. No charred trees, but the soil around it was dark, almost black. In the center, objects that didn't belong, arranged deliberately. The team rerouted immediately. They pushed through thick brush and fallen limbs, forcing their way to the coordinates. What they found wasn't a fire scar. It was something else entirely. The clearing was silent, too silent. No birds, no bugs, just the sound of their own breath. The trees bent slightly inward, warped unnaturally, as if leaning toward the center. At the edge, the soil crunched beneath their boots-dried, brittle, wrong. And then, under footbone. It didn't take long before they radioed for law enforcement. Within 24 hours, the site was closed off. The FBI returned to the Smokies for the first time in 3 decades. The anthropologists were interviewed, their footage seized. No one spoke publicly. But word leaked anyway. A bone circle discovered near the 1,991 search radius. 10 sets. Small. Likely adolescent. Dental records pending. The forest had kept it secret for 34 years. And now, for reasons no one could explain, it had decided to speak. The remains were not scattered. They were arranged. 10 distinct clusters of human bones, positioned precisely at the points of a perfect decagon. Each set was separated by exactly 3 feet, facing inward. The center was marked by a ring of stones blackened, smooth-edged, and unnaturally warm to the touch, even in shade. The entire formation was ringed by shallow carvings in the soil, barely visible unless the light hit just right. Circles within circles. Intersecting lines. Ancient geometry. None of it made sense. The bones had been bleached, not by sun or time, but something chemical. Forensic analysts confirmed unnatural exposure, likely through direct treatment. Yet there was no sign of containers, no residue. Just the bones. Clean. Placed. Most were intact, teeth present, growth plates consistent with ages between 11 and 15, vertebrae small, ribs delicate. Some skulls still partially whole, facing inward like they'd been watching something. The soil was carbon-rich. Burned once, a long time ago. Yet no tree roots had pierced the clearing. Nothing had grown inside the circle in over 3 decades, as if the earth itself had gone still. Each set of bones was paired with a single item. A boot. A cracked flashlight. A whistle. Evie's sketchbook, closed but water-warped, tucked near where her spine had once been. The drawings inside, some faded, some sharp, grew darker with each page. Symbols, trees with no leaves, circles drawn over and over until the paper tore. The final page was blank, except for one word written in pencil so faint it was almost missed. Listen. There were no adult remains. No sign of Josh or Kyle. But there was a disturbance outside the circle, a narrow path, where the brush had been trampled recently. Someone had come back, or never left. DNA confirmed the bones matched all 10 children who vanished in 1991. But how they got there, who placed them, and why they were arranged like a ritual offering no one could say. Only this was certain. The kids had never left the forest, and the forest had never let them go. The news broke on a Tuesday. It started as a leaking, unnamed federal source, confirming what many had feared the moment the story resurfaced. The bones found in the Smoky Mountain clearing belonged to the Trailhead 10. All 10, all accounted for. DNA matches across the board. Evie, Darnell, Logan, Sadie, Marcus, Maya, Owen, Gracie, Tyrell, Tommy. The names that had lived in amber for 34 years were suddenly everywhere, on screens, in headlines, on the lips of news anchors who weren't even alive when the kids vanished. Breaking. Remains confirmed to be children lost in 1991 Smoky Mountains disappearance. The nation remembered, or pretended to, but for the families, it wasn't nostalgia. It was agony. For decades, they had lived between 2 impossible truths, that their children might be dead or still out there waiting. Now, both doors slammed shut at once. The closure they had begged for came not as peace, but as something colder. Final. Irreversible. Irene Glenn, Sadie's mother, collapsed in her garden when the agents arrived. She still kept Sadie's room exactly as it had been, the sneakers by the bed, the half-read book on the nightstand. She was supposed to come home, she whispered. She promised. Others reacted with rage. Marcus's father refused to speak. Tommy's sister now in her Ford smashed the memorial glass case at Forest Glen Middle School when no one would let her see the photos from the site. Some still clung to doubt. Conspiracy threads reawakened online. If it was really them, where were the bodies all this time? Why now? Who put them there? The FBI held a press conference. They confirmed the DNA results. They labeled it a highly organized post-mortem staging and declined further comment. No arrests were made. No suspects named. Only one thing was clear. Something had been found that was never meant to be uncovered. And now that it had, something else might be watching. They called it the site, never the clearing, never the grave, as if language itself needed distance to protect the mind. Federal forensic teams arrived within hours of the confirmation. Hazmat suits, drones, ground-penetrating radar. Every inch was documented, photographed, measured. But the more they examined, the less it made sense. There were no signs of wildlife interference, no scavenger markings, no scattering of remains. Even in death, the kids had been protected, preserved, contained, as if the woods themselves had been keeping watch. But the bones told a story. Hairline cuts on long bones too straight, too deliberate to be weathering or accident. Some femurs had parallel scoring, almost surgical. A radius snapped clean, not shattered, but broken by applied force. Tiny fractures on the orbital sockets. Not enough to explain cause of death, but enough to disturb even the most seasoned examiners. Then there was the bleaching. All 10 sets of bones were unnaturally white. But this wasn't sun exposure. The surrounding forest blocked 80% of UV. It wasn't age ether bones buried in soil stain, crack, rot. These were clean, fragile, dry to the touch. Lab tests suggested high-temperature exposure or chemical treatment, but no trace residue was found. No accelerants, no scorch patterns on the soil. Just heat and something else. Something no one could identify. The carvings in the earth remained unweathered. Symbols never seen in any known linguistic database. Some resembled ancient runes. Others mimicked constellations. But they didn't repeat. No pattern. No meaning. Just presence. Inside the center ring, one rock sat slightly apart, not like the others. A smooth obsidian disk, warm even at night, without explanation. Under UV light, it shimmered faintly, with microscopic etching symbols too fine for the naked eye. No origin, no match, no logic. There were no adult remains, no sign of the chaperones, no wildlife, not even insects. The site had existed outside of time, and whatever had happened there, it had happened with precision. Not chaos. Not accident. This was planned. At first, the symbols seemed random. Etched into the dirt, barely visible beneath layers of pine needle and ash, they looped and spiraled in no discernible pattern. Some were simple circles, intersecting lines, half-moons. Others were more complex, composed of sharp angles that bled into one another, like glyphs carved from instinct rather than alphabet. What stood out wasn't their meaning, but their intent. Someone had made them with care, with time, with purpose. FBI forensics cataloged every mark. Soil samples were taken, 3D scans mapped the entire circle. Still, nothing made sense. The team brought in a linguist from UVA, then a semiotics expert from Dartmouth, then finally, an occult historian from New Orleans with more tattoos than degrees. None of them could match the symbols to any known language, ancient or modern. One expert described the markings as nonlinear communicative logic. Another called them pictographic invocation patterns. In simpler terms, not a message for people. A ritual, a map, or a warning. The anthropologist from the original college team noticed something else. The symbols mirrored tree growth patterns in the region. Not one-to-one, but close enough to raise eyebrows. A few matched the direction of underground water currents. One looked eerily like the old topographical lines of the FSR 41B trail before it was erased from maps. A local Cherokee elder was consulted. She wouldn't enter the site, wouldn't even look at the drone photos. But when shown one of the carvings, just one, she whispered a word in her language and left without explanation. That word, when translated, to summon what sleeps. After that, the federal team stopped consulting outsiders. The markings were deemed not culturally significant in the official report. But the agents on the ground started refusing night shifts. No one wanted to sleep near the circle. No one wanted to see what might wake. The geometry was perfect. 10 bone clusters. 10 stones. One for each child. Until someone counted again. There were 11. The 11th stone sat at the circle's edge, just slightly outside the perimeter, placed, deliberately, but different. Darker. Smoother. Smaller. As if it had been added later. The ground beneath it was disturbed more recently than the rest. The moss hadn't grown over. The soil wasn't settled. And unlike the others, this one bore a carving. Not like the symbols in the dirt, this one was clear. Deep. Intentional. It looked like an eye. Not a stylized one. A human one. Detailed. Anatomically correct, with a spiral carved into the iris. The groove was sharp. Fresh. A tool had been used within the past few years. Maybe even months. One agent proposed it was a marker, a dedication, a gravestone for someone left unnamed. But there were only 10 kids. And 2 counselors. So who did the 11th stone belong to? Evie's sketchbook offered a clue. One of the last pages beneath the warped paper and faded graphite held a faint drawing of the same eye. Not perfectly, but close. A circle within a circle. Lines radiating outward like roots. Or veins. And next to it, scribbled in faint pencil, "Not all of us left." No date, No name. Just the implication someone remained. Someone who had returned. Or never left at all. The FBI sealed the site after that. Posted 24-hour surveillance. Barred access. Not even the original anthropology team was allowed back. But the 11th rock stayed where it was. Untouched. Unclaimed. And some nights, agents swore it looked different. Like it had moved. Just slightly. His name was Martin Kellogg, a retired deputy from the Bartow County Sheriff's Office. He was 73 when he came forward stooped, soft-spoken, and nearly invisible in a crowded diner off Highway 27. He asked for no cameras, no interviews, just a pair of ears and a cup of black coffee. He slid a worn leather notebook across the table and said, "They told me to forget. I never did." Inside were pages of handwritten notes, photocopied trail maps, and Polaroids no one had ever seen. The notebook had been started in July 1991, the day after the Trailhead 10 disappeared. At the time, Kellogg had been a junior deputy, assigned to the outer perimeter of the search grid. No real authority, but plenty of time to watch and listen. The entries were meticulous. Day 3. Search dogs spooked. Refused to enter clearing near ridge. Handler said they whimpered like something was wrong in the air. Day 6. Spoke with a Cherokee tracker brought in unofficially. Said the trail was dead. Not cold. Dead. Said there was something older than the trail in those woods. Wouldn't come back. Kellogg had begun connecting dots notes on pagan symbology, obscure wilderness, cults, even a mention of magnetically active tree clusters. Theories dismissed at the time as nonsense. But now, with the discovery of the site, they read like prophecy. One page stood out. A rough sketch of a circle, almost identical to the one found in 2025. 10 dots around the edge. One at the center, labeled simply, The Eye. Kellogg claimed he brought his concerns to a superior in late '91. He was told the case was sealed, the federal presence was handling it, and if he valued his career or his pension, he'd stop asking questions. So he did. He filed the notebook under a false property tag and stored it in his attic for 3 decades. Until now. He wasn't asking for money. Or credit. Just closure. He leaned across the table and said, "You've only found the bones. You haven't found what they were left for." Then he stood up, nodded once, and walked out of the diner. No one ever saw him again. He lived off a dirt road the locals didn't mark. No mailbox, no phone. A collapsed barn beside a shack made of salvaged timber and old sheet metal. People called him Sticks. No one knew his real name. Most assumed he was either a drifter who never left, or a war vet who'd left too much behind. He came into town twice a year for canned food, propane, and coffee grounds. Didn't talk. Didn't look anyone in the eye. Until the bones were found. Then he asked to speak to someone. Park rangers took the call seriously. Part curiosity, part desperation. A pair of agents were dispatched to his property. They expected incoherent rambling, maybe some wild story about aliens or moonshiners. What they got was calm, detailed, and chilling. He said it happened on the night of July 12, 1991, the night the kids vanished. He'd been tracking a bear near the ridge, keeping his distance, hoping for a clean shot. But as he approached the clearing, he saw movement. Figures. Not the kids. Not animals. Something else. They wore robes. Gray or black. Hard to tell in the dark. Hoods drawn. Faces hidden. There were 11 of them. They stood in a circle around a faint fire, no smoke. Just light. They held hands. Chanted low, rhythmic sounds that didn't echo right. Sticks said the air felt too still. The forest too quiet. His flashlight shorted out. His ears rang. He didn't stay long. He backed away. Slowly. Carefully. He didn't run. You don't run when the woods are holding their breath. He never spoke of it, afraid no one would believe him, afraid someone would. But when he saw the photos of the stone circle on the news, he knew it was the same place. He recognized the tree line, the bend of the earth, the shape of the clearing. He looked the agents dead in the eye and said, "Whatever they did that night, it wasn't for this world." They asked if he'd return to the site. He shook his head. "If you go back there," he said, "don't bring guns, don't bring prayers, just don't go." And then he walked back into his shack, closed the door, and locked it. The agents didn't knock again. They almost missed it. While scanning the perimeter of the clearing for secondary evidence, a member of the forensic team noticed something tucked into a dry crevice beneath a twisted oak roothouse buried under dead leaves and brittle lichen. A compact notebook, the cover weather-worn but still intact. The name inside, faint but legible. Owen R. Briggs. Age, 12. It wasn't part of the original backpack discovery. It had been placed or dropped outside the circle, and it hadn't moved in decades. Inside were 22 pages. The early entries were ordinary. Notes on the trail, what he ate, who snored the loudest, mentions of Logan's army voice and Darnell's jokes. But about halfway through, the tone shifted. Entry 13. Evie says she hears something when it gets quiet, like whispers under the wind. Not birds, not bugs, just a sound behind everything else. Entry 14. Josh looked at the map again, said we'd camp on the ridge just for the night. Says it's not on the printed map, but it's perfectly safe. I don't like it here. It smells like metal. Entry 15. She called it The Gathering. Said they were coming. Said they come every few decades when the trees open up again. I thought she was kidding, but she's not. Entry 17. Can't sleep. Something's outside. Not an animal. Too quiet. Like it's listening. Entry 18. Evie says they're the Watchers. She said they've been waiting for us, that the woods picked us. I told her she was crazy, but she cried, and Evie doesn't cry. Entry 19. Logan went to talk to Kyle. Said something about turning back. He never came back. No one will talk about it. Entry 20. They stood in a circle last night. Not the kids. The others. I watched from the rocks. They didn't touch anything, just stood there, watching. Entry 21. If you find this, I hope you never go to the ridge. I hope you don't listen. I hope you don't see what we saw. Entry 22. They only need 10. The final page was ripped out. The journal changed everything. Up to that point, the story had been tragic but finite. 10 kids vanished. 10 bodies found. But now, with Owen's final words, they only need 10. A new question emerged. What if one survived? The 11th rock, the recent disturbance in the soil, the fresh carving, the unaccounted for page, they all hinted at one possibility. Someone had been back. Or had never left. Investigators revisited the old files. Eyewitness reports. Family statements. Owen's file mentioned chronic anxiety, night terrors, but also independence. Curiosity. He was a wanderer. A quiet one. The kind of kid who could disappear without being noticed until it was too late. The angle gained traction online first. Reddit threads, video essays, theories exploded. Some believed Owen escaped the ritual before it completed. Others argued the opposite, that he was chosen to finish it, to return decades later and lay the 11th stone. A third theory was worse. That he never left the woods at all. That he became something else. A ranger stationed near the site claimed he saw someone standing just beyond the tree line one night. A chilled or what looked like one too still. Too pale. When they approached, the figure was gone. No prints. No heat signature. The survivor theory gained enough momentum that the FBI quietly reopened interviews with the original families. A few had received strange letters over the years. Unmarked envelopes, no return addresses. Most dismissed them as hoaxes, but one stood out. Evie's parents. They had kept a postcard, mailed in 2006. Blank on the back, except for a hand-drawn spiral in the corner. The same spiral etched into the 11th stone. DNA testing is underway on the journal. For now, it's inconclusive. But inside the back cover, faint and smudged, someone had written 2 words. I watched. If Owen survived, he would be 46 today. But no one has seen him. At least, not in the way they expect. And deep in the forest, the 11th stone remains untouched. Waiting. The truth didn't bring peace. For some families, it was a confirmation horrific, but final. Their children, missing for 34 years, had been found. Not rescued, not saved, but found. Bones arranged in a circle. Their last belongings displayed like relics. For others, it was a deeper wound. A cruelty. Proof that their kids hadn't just vanished, they'd been taken, used, placed. For what, no one could explain. The grief came back like a wave, stronger this time. It had shape now. Weight. Names carved in granite were suddenly real again. Voices they hadn't heard in decades now echoed in headlines, in evidence logs, in nightmares. Margaret Boone, Marcus's mother, refused to attend the memorial service. She said her son didn't die in those woods. He was taken, and if he could be taken, he could be returned. She wore his old football jersey to bed, was seen talking to his empty room at night. "He still visits me," she whispered to a reporter. "Not like a ghost, like a whisper. In my sleep, he tells me not to believe what they say." Irene Glenn, Sadie's mother, locked her front door and stopped answering calls. She left meals on the porch for a daughter who would never come home. Every morning, she made the bed. Every night, she laid out pajamas. The grief had turned ritual, as if trying to mirror what had been done in that forest circle. Some parents turned on each other. Blame circled like vultures. Why had the camp chosen that trail? Why had the counselors taken the unmarked path? Who gave the order to call off the search after only 2 weeks? Lawsuits were filed. Old resentments unearthed. A few parents, the quiet ones, just faded. Their grief was still heavy, silent, the kind that didn't scream, just waited. The community held a memorial service. 17 people attended. None of the parents spoke. Afterward, someone left a hand-drawn spiral at the base of the podium. No one claimed it. It was found in the back of a locked drawer at the Cherokee County Historical Archives, hidden beneath a stack of flood damage reports from the 1970s. A survey map dated April 1902, hand-drawn in iron gall ink and labeled in faded cursive, ridges west of Ravens Bluff. At first, it looked like any other topographic rendering: river bends, elevation lines, forgotten trails. But in the far left quadrant, deep within the interior forest, was a symbol. A circle, 10 dots along its edge, one in the center. Next to it, a single note scrawled in the margin. "Circle of forgetting. Do not mark further." Archivists contacted local tribal historians. Most didn't recognize the reference. But one elder, when shown a scan of the symbol, grew quiet. She pointed to the word "forgetting" and said, "It's not the right word. Our term means something more like remembering too deeply." She explained that long before maps, before state lines, the area had been known among her people as a place where the boundaries between now and before thinned. A crossing place. Not for the living, and not entirely for the dead. The stories were always vague by design. These tales weren't written down. They were warnings passed through generations. About the watchers in the dark, the ones who marked cycles, waited in silence, and gathered when the forest allowed it. Every few decades, the circle opened. Not physically, spiritually, in memory. The map's age placed it 3 cycles before 1991, and no known events had ever been recorded, at least not by those who returned. After the map resurfaced, the FBI requested a full digital archive of Cherokee documents from the surrounding region. Their request was denied. "This is not for your kind to categorize," one elder said. When asked what the symbol truly meant, she hesitated, then answered, "It marks where time forgets itself." The map has since gone missing from the archive. A photocopy remains. On the back, written in ballpoint pen, "It opens again soon." They were supposed to be the responsible ones. Josh Eaton and Kyle Drenner, both in their 20s, both vetted, certified, and clean. Former Eagle Scouts, CPR trained. No red flags, no criminal records, no strange behavior leading up to the hike. Josh was the energetic one, a clipboard always in hand, known for dad jokes and keeping the kids moving. Kyle was quieter, more observant. A former Army medic who preferred listening over talking. But after July 12, 1991, they vanished too. No bodies, no bones, no trace. It's a fact that's often overshadowed by the 10 children. But for investigators, it's a glaring gap. 10 remains were recovered, not 12. If the chaperones died with the group, where were they? The original FBI files make only sparse mention of them, beyond personnel logs and family interviews. Both families insisted the men would never hurt the kids. No history of violence, no signs of distress. Kyle had a fiancée. Josh had applied to grad school. They weren't flight risks. And yet, the forensic site revealed nothing of them. No adult bones. No clothing that matched their sizes. No gear associated with either man. It was as if they'd walked the children into the circle, then stepped out of time. One theory speculated they were victims too dragged elsewhere, maybe buried in an unmarked location. But no evidence supported it. Another theory was darker, that they'd led the children into the ritual knowingly, that they were part of it. But if so, why leave no trace? Why vanish completely? The journal Owen left behind described Logan confronting Kyle and then not returning. That Kyle may have silenced dissent. That Josh, perhaps, looked the other way. Or didn't make it at all. If they were perpetrators, where did they go? If they were victims, why weren't they claimed? One line from the journal stood out, a throwaway entry from early in the trip. Kyle says there are places in the woods people don't come back from. I said that sounds made up. He just looked at me. Maybe he knew something. Maybe he didn't. But somewhere, 2 adults disappeared into the wood sand, were never found again. And if they're still out there, no one is sure what they've become. The site had been sealed, fenced, monitored, 24-hour surveillance from a discreet ranger outpost hidden in the hills. No one was supposed to get near it. Not hikers, not press, not families. And yet someone did. On June 3rd, 2025, a routine check by a forensics drone picked up something new. Disturbance in the ash. The soil inside the circle had shifted, subtly. Not wind, not erosion. Something stepped there. When the forensics team arrived the next morning, they found prints. Not child-sized. Not boot prints. Bare feet. 11 of them. Not 11, 11 distinct impressions. One set, left in a slow, deliberate walk around the outer perimeter of the circle, each step placed with exact spacing. The gait was strange, uneven, not limping but hesitant, intentional, as if the person was walking through something only they could see. The soil was dry. The prints were fresh, and worse, they led out of the circle, toward the tree line, then vanished. No exit tracks, no broken brush, no scent for dogs to follow. Whoever or whatever had walked through that site left no other sign of presence. Lab scans confirmed the prints were human. Size: approximately adult male, narrow heel, flat arch. No match in any current law enforcement database. No park visitors unaccounted for. No staff missing. One agent quietly floated the idea that the prints weren't left by a person at all, but by something else wearing a shape. Something returning to the site not to mourn, but to maintain it. Others turned to the survivor theory again. Was this Owen, now grown, now changed? Had he come back to complete something? Or to wait for the next cycle? For now, no answers. Only ash. Only silence. And 11 steps in a place where there should only be 10. A month after the footprint discovery, a hydrologist working with the Park Service reviewed old geological scans and noted something strange. A subterranean water system ran directly beneath the ritual site. Not a stream, a cave, one that hadn't been explored in decades due to flooding and unstable rock. They called it the Drowned Vein. With federal approval, a dive team was brought in 3 experienced cavers, 1 forensic specialist. They entered through a collapsed ravine 3 miles east of the site. The passage was narrow, claustrophobic, the water icy and still, visibility poor. But about 40 meters in, the cave widened into a submerged chamber. And there, they found the first item. A strip of cloth, tangled in an outcrop of limestone, faded blue, torn, but distinct. A section of a Juniper Ridge counselor's uniform. Next to it, snagged in a bed of silt, a hiking boot adult size, partially rotted. Inside, a single ankle bone. They pressed deeper. Near the back of the chamber, the walls were scarred long grooves, vertical, not from erosion. Something had moved through here. Something large, or many somethings. Below a ledge, a second boot. No match to the first. Then, in the furthest recess of the cave, just above the waterline, a ledge. Bones. Not full skeleton, partial remains. A femur, 2 ribs, a jawbone missing all teeth. The bones were older, estimated to be at least 70 years, pre-1991. No match to the children. Not adults either. Adolescents. But smaller. Malnourished. DNA testing failed to identify the remains in any missing persons database. Carved above the ledge was a single symbol. A circle with 3 vertical slashes. It matched one of the markings at the ritual site. Some in the dive team refused to re-enter the cave. One developed persistent nightmares. Another described hearing whispers in his rebreather headset names he didn't recognize, repeated over and over. The bones were sealed in evidence storage. No cause of death confirmed. But the theory took hold quickly. Whatever happened on the surface wasn't new. The cave had seen this before, and the forest had been feeding something for much, much longer than anyone realized. In an attempt to understand the impossible, the FBI launched a full environmental reconstruction of the 1,991 disappearance. Using GPS mapping, magnetic field monitors, and drone LiDAR, they recreated the exact trail, terrain, and elevation profile the group had followed. What they discovered raised more questions than answers. The trail FSR 41B, the forbidden path, did not appear on any GPS system. The moment hikers stepped onto it, satellite signal degraded, radios failed intermittently. Compass needles drifted, not spinning, just leaning. A subtle, persistent pull westward. At first they blamed buried mineral deposits. Iron, maybe. Magnetite. But scans revealed nothing unusual. The soil was average. The rock, ordinary shale. No reason for instruments to malfunction. But they did. Multiple times, drone navigation drifted. Compass needles pointed inward toward the clearing even when standing yards away from the perimeter. Devices that worked flawlessly just minutes before failed to recalibrate until completely removed from the area. One operative described it best. It's not that the tech breaks, it's that it listens to something else. During a live reenactment, actors were placed in mock positions of the 10 children and 2 chaperones. As night fell, a sound engineer picked up low-frequency vibrations within the site audible, only through specialized microphones. Not mechanical, not natural, a tone that pulsed every 34 seconds. The frequency did not match any animal, weather, or seismic data, but it mirrored a signal recorded once before from a Cold War-era surveillance station in Alaska, designed to detect underground nuclear tests. They called it an anomaly. In both cases, the signature was the same. The reenactment ended early when one of the actors collapsed near the 11th stone, disoriented, mumbling. He didn't remember walking to it, didn't remember touching it. But under his fingernails, they found ash. The team packed up that night. The conclusion wasn't formal, not in writing. But those who were there understood. The terrain wasn't just altered. It was inhabited. It wasn't public, not at first. But when the FBI reopened Case File 9110 following the bone discovery, a request was made quietly for cross-references to any past disappearances in the Smoky Mountain region under similar conditions. What came back wasn't expected. It was a box. Unmarked, dust-covered. Pulled from an archive shelf in Quantico and labeled only CIRD-10, declassified 1974. Inside were reports typed, yellowed, water-damaged in places. They told a story that had been buried in layers of bureaucracy and silence. Disappearances. Clusters. Always groups of 10. Ages varied, but most were children. 1,947. 1,959. 1,966. 1,973. Every case occurred within a 150-mile radius of what would later become the FSR 41B corridor. In each report, circles, not always stone, sometimes drawn in salt, bone, or soot. Descriptions of unexplainable compass behavior. Reports of humming, of figures in woods, of processions seen at twilight hooded, silent, vanishing before they could be approached. And then, always, the cover-up. Blamed on animal attacks, avalanches, runaways. One document from 1959 referenced a secretive group the Bureau called the Orrery, believed to be a loosely organized cult operating along ancient trail networks across Appalachia. Motive unclear. Their symbolism focused on celestial patterns, equinoxes, cycles, always revolving around the number 10. The cult was never confirmed. No arrests, no bodies, just patterns. But in one particularly chilling memo, a field agent scribbled a note in the margin of a photo showing a burned clearing with ash-marked symbols. They don't want all of them. They want just enough. Later, in a post-case analysis report, one line stood out. They do not summon something. They prepare something. It becomes real because they make it real. The 10th is the offering. The 11th is the gate. The file was marked as closed in 1974. Until now, because it had happened again. And this time, the ritual was completed. The recovered journal Owens was re-examined after references to the gathering and the watchers took on new meaning. Forensic analysts used infrared scanning on torn and water-damaged pages, hoping to lift hidden impressions. What they found changed everything. On what would have been page 23 ripped out, the faint outline of a name appeared beneath the pressure of the missing page. Letters, reversed, but clear. Delaney. It wasn't a name on the original camp roster. Not one of the 10 known kids. Not a counselor, not in school records, no emergency contact. No missing persons filed in 1,991 under that name from the area. Delaney didn't exist. At least, not officially. But cross-referencing nearby camp sign-in logs from that week revealed something. A first name, written in a child's hand. Delaney R. Tucked at the bottom of the sign-in sheet, almost like an afterthought. No last name, no age, no cabin assignment. Just the name and a spiral symbol doodled beside it. When questioned, the original camp staff had no memory of the child. No photos, no registration. The spot should have been unclaimed. But there had always been rumors about one more kid. One who never showed up in the roll call, but was seen in the background of a group photo taken July 10, 2 days before the disappearance. That photo, reanalyzed, showed an extra figure in the shadows near the tree line, barely visible, a small girl, pale, watching, not posing. The facial recognition software failed to match her to any known student. And Evie's sketchbook, one chaotic swirl of lines and jagged figures, showed a central character labeled D, the only one drawn in full detail, sharp, staring, alone. The theory formed quickly. Delaney was never on the list because Delaney wasn't meant to be. She was the 11th. Not a victim. Not a participant. But something else. The gate, the key, the link. And perhaps, the one who never left the woods. His name was Devon Hall, a geospatial analyst contracted for the site reconstruction team. 38, experienced, skeptical by nature. He'd mapped volcanic fault lines in Chile, glacial melt zones in Alaska, and dense canopy shifts in Borneo. He didn't scare easily. Until the Smoky Mountains. On the morning of August 4, 2025, Hall didn't report to the mobile command center. His GPS tracker showed him last heading west of the clearing routine data collection. He was expected back by noon. He never returned. The team searched the immediate perimeter, then the surrounding forest. Nothing. His radio was silent. No distress call. No signs of struggle. The forest had simply taken him. Just like before. It took 3 days to find his camp. Not a standard issue one. This was something else. A makeshift tent assembled from his own tarp and cord pitched inside a clearing none of the team had mapped. New. Undocumented. Like it had grown there. His gear was arranged in a spiral. Laptop, boots, backpack. One item at each turn, perfectly spaced. His data drive sat at the center, crushed, as if stepped on. Inside the tent, one object. A single stone, obsidian. Smooth. Carved with the now familiar symbol of the eye. It sat where his head would have lain. No blood, no signs of a struggle, just the stone, and silence. Search teams found no tracks leading in or out. The soil showed no disturbance. His scent vanished 50 yards from the site. Dogs refused to cross the spiral. The case was officially marked unresolved disappearance, possible environmental factors. But the crew knew better. One team member resigned that night. Another left the site without permission and drove west. He hasn't responded to calls. The FBI sealed the new clearing. No one spoke about it again. But the spiral remains. And the forest feels different now. Not watching. Waiting. Fall arrived early that year. The forest changed the way it always does, leaves crisped into gold, air sharpened with the bite of rot and cold. But in that stretch of forgotten ridgeline, nothing moved. No wind, no bird song. Just trees too still, too aware. The circle was never closed. Though the remains were recovered, no efforts were made to disturb the formation itself. The stones were left, the soil untouched. The 11th rock remained exactly where it had been found. Watching. Some say the ritual had ended. Others say it had only just begun. Occult theorists pointed out a grim detail. The children vanished in 1,991. Their bones were found in 2025, 34 years. And if the pattern in the cult files holds, the next cycle begins in 2059. Another 34 years. Another 10. The map recovered from 1,902. Its ink faded in one place. But beneath it, barely visible, were tiny notches, 5 marks, each 34 years apart. 5 circles, 5 vanishings. The 6th was now. Locals say the ridge hums some nights, a low, pulsing vibration that can be felt in the ribs. Campers report dreams of trees bending inward, of being watched by things that do not move, that do not blink. Of Delaney, standing at the edge of firelight, not aged, not changed, just there, waiting. The site remains under surveillance, but the agents are fewer now. The budget cut, the interest faded, new tragedies occupy the headlines. But for those who remember those who lived it, the circle is not a memory. It is a warning. No one walks FSR 41B anymore. No one marks it on maps. And deep in the Smoky Mountains, just west of Ravens Bluff, there is a place where time bends, where rituals leave stains in the soil, and where silence is never truly empty. The forest knows. The forest remembers. Some things don't want to be found because they were never meant to leave. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane